Well, hey there, Breakfast Club. Welcome to Monday's edition. You're with Got That Funk. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to address JJ Talks, who made a video on Friday about suicide. And JJ, I thought you made a really good video. One of the main things you concentrated on in the beginning was that you thought it's really difficult to talk about suicide without people sort of jumping to conclusions and, bringing forward sort of a lot of preconceived notions about the do's and don'ts and whys and why nots of suicide. And I think you brought up the issue of body autonomy and stuff like that in your video as well, which is where I'm going to start with my video. Basically, for me, my personal philosophy emanates from two foundational axioms. The first one, I would guess you'd call a primary one, would be that we are all the sovereign of our own body. If you naturally extrapolate outward from that premise, you can understand where we get our rights from, and what responsibilities we have as well, and so on. But one problem with that as being the foundational axiom is it's incomplete, because that's only a starting point for a basis of personal philosophy. There's other things to consider that are probably equally weighty, and so my second foundational axiom, which unfortunately sometimes is in conflict with the first one, is that we're all in this together. Human beings depend on one another. That's just a fact. No man is an island, as they once said. Is that Hemingway? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I feel very strongly that human beings depend on one another, so that we therefore cooperation becomes an imperative of life, and with the responsibility of cooperation probably comes a little bit of loss of personal sovereignty. You're not totally free if you have to consider other people all the time, right? So there's no such thing as perfect freedom or total freedom. There's freedom within the confines of what we need to have to protect one another from each other. Society has to have laws and rules and stuff like that. Anyway, these two foundational axioms come into stark contrast when it comes to the issue of suicide, because from the premise that you are the sovereign of your own body would naturally emanate that there's no one in the world, not the government, not another person, who has the right to take your life without your consent. You are the only person who has the right to take your life without checking with anyone else first. And to me, it really is that simple. I know that taking body autonomy to that sort of length is a bit extreme for some people. I don't think so. I think it seems quite natural to me that if anybody has the right to end my life, it's me. So there's that. But the other foundational axiom then kicks in, because, what do we owe the people in our life? What do we owe society? How much of me isn't mine? How much of me belongs to them, whoever them are, whether it's your family, your friends, your associates at work, other people who may rely on your presence, that kind of thing. So, I remember someone during the presidential campaign last year mentioned suicide as a topic to Bernie Sanders, and he just said he thought it was really selfish because, of course, if you've got kids, you're leaving people behind who are going to grieve, and that's just unfair to do. Now, JJ mentioned in her video that she sort of thought, is it selfish of me if I don't want someone to kill themselves? If they're having a hard time, shouldn't I just, let them do it and be happy for them that they've ended their own suffering? Well, I've got news for you, hon. Feelings are almost always selfish, and that's okay. The most selfish feeling that you can probably ever have is, I want to take my own life. I mean, that's pretty fucking selfish. That's the most selfish thing I can think of. That's right, your life is so yours that you're going to end it all regardless of what anyone else thinks. That's way more selfish than please don't kill yourself, in my opinion. So I suppose it's all relative. And being selfish in itself shouldn't really have a stigma attached to it. It's a natural state of being. we're all selfish on a level, everyone obviously in different degrees and in different ways, but bottom line is human beings are naturally selfish, and I don't think it's something we should shirk off or try to deny. I think it's just a healthy part of everyone's psychology. It's okay to be selfish as long as you're not a prick about it. That's my attitude. Anyway, as regards suicide, I also kind of wanted to take issue with this idea that you really ought to be in some sort of insufferable, intolerable state of mind or state of physical being in order to qualify as it being okay, in quotation marks, for you to take your own life. I'm sorry, I'm actually even way more off the scale than that, because in my opinion, frankly, I would legalize euthanasia, and anybody who wanted to have their life ended could just go down and do it. Whether they were depressed or not, to me, isn't necessarily relevant. Obviously, that brings up a whole different set of problems, and I acknowledge that. But having said that, my whole thing when it comes to the two foundational axioms in conflict with one another over the issue of suicide, I pretty much will almost always come down on the side of ultimately the sovereignty of the self is the most important of the two axioms. And yeah, I don't understand why you need to be suffering. Once when I was about 25, I very seriously considered suicide because everything was going great in my life, and I thought, why not go out on a high? You're young, you're handsome, you had everything going for you, yeah? Why not just go out like that? And therefore you would spare yourself so much suffering because you went out on a high. That was how I was reasoning at the time. Of course I didn't do it blatantly, right? I was 30 years later. But regardless, the point is, if I had done that, I would have missed out on an awful lot in my life. I acknowledge that absolutely. My kids wouldn't even exist if I did that. So obviously it would have been a huge mistake. I acknowledge that. But had I done that, it would have been, in my opinion, my right to do it. And I wouldn't have known what I missed because I wouldn't have been here to miss it. So I don't want to make light of this issue, obviously, but I have given it so much thought over my life, just as a general topic of philosophical discussion. It fascinates me how different people come down on this issue. Now, I've had family members attempt suicide but fail, thank goodness, and I have had acquaintances but not close friends who've killed themselves. So the issue is a pretty personal one for me on that level as well. And yeah, there is definitely, when someone that you know, even if it's someone you don't know very well, if they take their own life, it kind of pisses you off, you're like, how dare you, But that's just a natural part of grieving, I think, and I don't think you should feel bad for it or for feeling that way, or be made to feel like you're not supposed to feel that way for any other reason, and to attribute the person who's taken their own life either. At the end of the day, when someone commits suicide, they may or may not say they've done it for other reasons, but ultimately they decided to do it for themselves. And because they decided to do it for themselves, I can't really see why people object so much, in terms of, like I said, I can understand the bereavement argument about it, but at the end of the day, if we elevated this idea that we're all sovereign of our own selves, maybe people would understand where their sort of rights and responsibilities come from a bit more, and we would be a bit more open to the different ideas about how different people see life and want to live it or not. I want to thank you for watching this video. I look forward to any comments that you've got in the comment section, which I will be vigorously engaging with in the spirit of my new awakening, thanks to Galen's comments last week on Joe's video. Anyway, until next time, may all your ups and downs be ups. See you then.